So as we go into our Bible study, I will ask Jeevan to give us a summary of our Bible study of the last Acts chapter 26. So over to Jeevan.
Thanks, Sachin. So last time we learned from Acts chapter 26, verses 1 to 32, Paul's trial in Caesarea in front of King Agrippa. As a background, Paul was brought in front of the king by Festus, as he has nothing definite to write about Paul to Caesar. The whole trial is mainly about Paul's defense and Agrippa's ruling. Paul, in front of the majestic audience, addressed King Agrippa and said, he is fortunate that Agrippa is familiar with Jewish customs and controversies. The Jews know him as well from his youth that he has studied under Gamaliel and trained to become a Pharisee. He then mentioned how he persecuted the church, locking up saints in prison after receiving authority from chief priests, casting votes against them to put them to death, punished them in synagogues, and even persecuted them in foreign cities. All these Paul mentioned as what has happened in his past life. He then brought his conversion experience to the king, the events that happened on the way to Damascus. He said he saw a light from heaven, brighter than sun, and when all fell to the ground, Paul heard this voice asking, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Paul asked, who are you, Lord? And the Lord replied, I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. Paul then explains his life and mission, continuing from his conversion experience, where Lord asked him to be his servant and witness. Paul declared this first to the people in Damascus, then in Jerusalem, Judea, and to Gentiles, that they should repent and turn to God. Paul then explained how Jews persecuted him for this reason and how God helped him throughout. Paul here conveyed a simple and straightforward message, repeating the words of the prophets and Moses about the Christ who will suffer and rise from the dead. And when Paul put forward his appeal, Festus shouted if Paul went out of his mind, but Paul was ever composed to reply, he is not, and that King Agrippa has noticed everything he said, for this has not been done in a corner. The intrigued Agrippa, on the other hand, asked Paul if Paul is trying to persuade him to be a Christian in this short time. For this, Paul said, whether short or long, I would to God that not only you, but also all who hear me this day might become such as I am, except these chains. Then the ruling of King Agrippa stated, this man is doing nothing to deserve death or imprisonment. And to Festus, he said, this man could have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar. Achan reminded us when sharing our testimony, we should use this pattern, the former life, the conversion experience, and the changed life as this great example set by Paul. Over to you, Achan.
Thank you, Jeevan, for doing a good summary. We now have a clear picture of what happened what happened to Paul, and we are now proceeding to the next part of our Bible study. That we know that Paul's trial happens in Jerusalem, in Caesarea, and then he travels to Rome. Although the book of Acts just concludes in Acts chapter 28 that Paul reached Rome and then he ministered to the Jews and to the Gentiles, but we don't read about Paul's trial in Rome. So as we always do, this chart, I'm sure that when we first saw the chart, it looked very confusing. Now I'm sure that everyone who's gone through this Bible study can easily explain this chart. And this chart gives us a good idea about the book of Acts. Now, you may be happy that the green line is almost reaching the end. And so we are soon, with the next Wednesday, we will finish the book of Acts. So here we know that we are in Acts chapter 27. And here it is titled as Shipwreck. But I have titled this as Paul's Journey to Rome. And let's go into the details and see how it is. And here, the other chart reminds us that it is Paul's journey to Rome. It probably happened in between 59 and 60 AD. And this is recorded in Acts chapter 27 and 28. And when we come to Acts chapter 28, we will see a little more about Paul, how he reached Rome and what he did there. So with this, if you remember, this is the outline that we planned for Acts chapter 21. Acts chapter 21 verse 17 ended with Paul's third missionary journey. And after the 3 missionary journeys, Paul had 3 trials. One trial in Jerusalem before the Sanhedrin, and then we saw how he had to escape to Caesarea with the help of the Roman centurion. And then in Caesarea, he was tried first by Felix, Festus, and Agrippa. Now, just to ask you a question, can anybody tell me how long was Paul in Caesarea? How long was his trial, or how long did he have to stay in Caesarea because of this trial? Anybody remembers how long Paul had to stay in Caesarea for the trial? Okay, if you remember, under Felix, Felix kept him for 2 years without making a decision. And then Festus comes and he begins the trial. So we know that Paul was in Caesarea for about 2 years. Okay, so our final portion is point 3 now, that is Journey to Rome, which we read in Acts chapter 27 and 28. Now, as we read Acts chapter 27, I don't know how many of you got an opportunity to read Acts chapter 27. You may find this chapter very technical about Paul's journey, and you may wonder what is there to learn in this chapter. But honestly, as I was studying this chapter, I think this is one of the most blessed chapters in the book of Acts. I've been immensely blessed by the study of Acts chapter 27. And I hope as we go through, you will be able to pick up something for your own life as we study this chapter. Now, some of the highlights of Acts chapter 27, as you know, that Paul appealed to Caesar, which we read in Acts chapter 25, verse 10 to 12. Then after the trial in Caesarea, he is taken to Rome. So the journey begins in Acts chapter 27. Rome is where Caesar is. And so some of you may, I don't know what is in your mind when we talk about Paul appeal to Caesar and that he wants to go to Rome. And as I read these chapters, it becomes very clear that Paul is not appealing to Caesar so that justice is done to him, because the emperor at that time is Emperor Nero, and he was ruthless with the Christians. And Paul was not looking to get to Rome or to appealing to Caesar so that he might get a fair trial, because he knows that Caesar can be even worse than the Jews and the others. He will be ruthless in treating Paul. And finally, we read from church history that Paul was beheaded in Rome at the command of Nero. So we know that Paul was not looking in terms of justice, that he would receive justice by going to Caesar, but Paul wanted to fulfill his ambition and the call that God had given him to get to Rome. So that is how I see Paul's journey to Rome. Now, Acts chapter 27 and 28 covers the journey from Caesarea to Rome. Now, Paul is accompanied by Aristarchus and Luke, and we see this in the V passages. I'm sure that you are familiar with the V passages that we talk about in the book of Acts. We know that the V passage includes Luke. And then we see that they had to change 3 ships in their journey. If you read Acts chapter 27, verse 3, they started on the first ship. then in verse 6, you read that they changed the ship, and then that the second ship almost broke, and there was a shipwreck. And then in chapter 28, verse 11, you find that they found the third ship that was going to Rome. Now, the second and third ships were the Alexandrian ships. So Alexandria is an important port in Egypt. So Egypt was known as the breadbasket for the rest of the world. And so these Alexandrian ships were ships that were carrying wheat. And as we read in Acts chapter 27, we see them throwing off the wheat from the ship to reduce the weight of the ship. So these were Alexandrian ships, and they were carrying wheat from Egypt to Rome. Now, as we read this chapter, you will find the journey very rough and dangerous. There were times that they thought they will all drown. And as we read, if you have read chapter 27, you will realize that. And in this chapter, you will find a lot of description of the sea journey and technical terms of sailing, some of which casual reader, some of us who are not familiar with sailing and with the sea routes or the challenges in a journey by sea, we will not be able to understand that. There are a lot of technical terms that are used, and we may not cover everything, but I just, as a matter of fact, I want to mention that to you. And then we see that the second ship the ship that had a shipwreck, according to Acts chapter 27, verse 37, there were 276 persons in this ship. So with this gives you an idea about what Acts chapter 27 is. Basically, Paul's journey to Rome by sea. It is covered over 2 chapters. Paul has Aristarchus and Luke with him, and they had to change 3 ships. The second and third ships were called Alexandrian ships, which basically were carrying wheat from Egypt to Rome. And the journey has been extremely dangerous. And there were about 276 persons, according to Acts 27:37. That was it. Now, making an outline for the for the chapter Acts 27. First, we're going to look at the route. A lot is mentioned, a lot of places are mentioned in Acts chapter 27. And how do we better understand or picturize this? It is important to understand the route. Then, as we study Acts chapter 27, Paul taken as a prisoner along with other prisoners, but his role in the ship is more than a prisoner, is what we see. And then finally, we see God is present with us in the storms of life. Wonderful thought for us. And I've been immensely blessed as thinking about how God is present with us in the storms of life, particularly the times that we are going through. A lot of people are uncertain about what is going to happen, and we have anxious moments. And so the storm of the pandemic reminds us that God is present in the storms of life. Okay, with this, we go to the first point. We're talking about the route. Now, if you can follow the route, we are right here. If you can follow my cursor, this area is a seaport. And from there, the first point is we see that they stop at Sidon, and then they come to Myra, where they change the ship. And then the ship I suppose it was to take a different route. It was to go above Crete and then go on to Rome this way. But then we see that the winds and the storm drove the ship away, and then they come to some places called Salmon and Fair Havens, and then they are in the middle of the sea, and there is a storm here, and finally the ship comes up to Malta, and that is where Acts chapter 27 ends. In Acts chapter 28, we will read about the journey from Malta to Rome. So today we're going to cover from Caesarea, Sidon, Myra, Salmon, Fair Havens, and then Malta. So these are the places. Now, I want to give you some idea about these places. Now, first, we talk about Sidon. Sidon is modern-day Lebanon. And this was the first stop after after Paul left from Caesarea. And so the journey began from Caesarea, and it's about 67 miles from Caesarea to Sidon. And Sidon was a very important trading port. And so maybe the ship stopped there for some trading purposes. And we read from Acts chapter 27, verse 3. The next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul with consideration and allowed him to go to his friends and receive care. So Paul was given a free hand, although a prisoner. Something very interesting is the centurion gives Paul a free hand. The ship would have taken a few days to do all the trading, loading and unloading and all those things. And during that time, Paul was given a free hand to go and meet the believers and to receive care and minister to them. So this is something wonderful that we read. So now from here, it is a long journey that goes straight to Myra. And it says, as you read the scripture, it says they passed through Cilicia and Cyprus. All these places are mentioned. So you get an idea when you see this map about the journey. So they started from Caesarea. The first stop was Sidon, which is modern day Lebanon, about 67 miles from Caesarea. It was a trading point. And Paul was given a free hand to meet people and to be ministered unto. Then the second place that we read about is Myra in verse 5. It says that, as you read verse 5, it says, when we had sailed through the sea along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myra in Lycia. So what happens in Myra? Myra, again, is a major trading harbor. You will find that this is at the southern tip of the Asia Minor. So all ships passing this way will touch Myra. And here it says in verse 6, there the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy, and he put us aboard in it. So the first change of the ship happens in Myra, because the ship that left from Caesarea was going to this place. If you can follow my cursor, just above Asia, what is written in as Asia, you see the place called Adramyttium. So this is the place where the ship was heading to, the first ship. And so here we see that that Paul, the ship which stopped at Myra, the centurion found a larger ship that was going to Italy, and so all the prisoners are now in the second ship. So this is something about Myra. Then we come to in verse 7, 8, and 12. We read about a little bit of confusion here, because as I said, the route would have been to just go straight along this path and get to Rome. But then because of the wind, it says that the ship had to go down this way, and it came to a place called Salmon. And then it came to Fair Havens. And then it was supposed they were heading actually to Phoenix here. But then the ship was caught in a storm, and it went into the Mediterranean Sea, and middle of the sea, there was huge storm. The ship was lost in the storm, and then finally it reaches Malta. So the places that are mentioned in verse 7, 8, and 12, Salmon, Fair Havens, and Phoenix, are all part of this island in island of Crete. There are several ports and harbors in the island in Crete. Okay, then we come to another place that is mentioned in verse 17 is the Shale of Cyprus, and this area that you read here is Cyprus Major and Cyprus Minor. This is just above Africa, and this place it's a dangerous area where there are quicksands, and the ships get stuck in those quicksands. And it is also this area is also called as the graveyard of ships, because once they get into the quicksand, they can't move. And so there is a fear that the ship could have got into this, as you read verse 17, it talks about the shallow of Cyprus. And then finally, we see the place called Malta, also known as Melitia. And this was about 14 days struggle. That is from when the ship left from Fair Havens to Malta is about 14 days struggle, as we read in verse 33. And this was supposed to be an excellent harbor. And we believe that Paul, according to this, what we read in Acts chapter 28, Paul and the whole team were here in Malta for almost 3 months. So this gives you an idea, because there are so many places mentioned in Acts chapter 27, to make it simple and to give you a picture how the journey went. So this is where they started, Caesarea, and the first stop was Sidon, and then they went to Myra, and then we will talk a little bit about Phoenix a little later, and then they were tossed around these ports in the island of Crete, and then they lost track totally. The ship was lost in the storm. They didn't know where they were heading. As you would read, they couldn't make out between day and night. They couldn't see sunlight at all. And so for 14 days, they struggled through the storm, and finally the ship reached Malta. Although that was not their destination, it reached Malta is what we see. So we will, this is an idea for you about the route that the ship took. And as I told you, we end the journey in Acts chapter 27 ends with Malta. And in chapter 28, we will read about the journey from Malta to Italy and Rome. So this is about the route. Now, when we go to the next point, we see Paul more than a prisoner. So what are the things that say that Paul was, why do I say that Paul was more than a prisoner? First point, I have 3 points here. The first point I see is Paul, a friend. This I gather from Acts chapter 27, verse 1 to 3. When it was decided that we would sail for Italy, Paul and some other prisoners were handed over to a centurion called Julius, who belonged to the imperial regiment. We boarded a ship from Adramyttium, about to sail for ports along the coast of the province of Asia, and we put to sea. Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, was with us. The next day, we landed at Sidon, and Julius, in his kindness, allowed him to go to his friends so that they might provide his needs. So we see Paul, the first ship was heading on to, as I said, Adramyttium, and then we see that Julius was the centurion who was in charge of the prisoner. He was of the imperial regiment, and he was given the charge of taking a set of prisoners from Caesarea to Rome, and in which Paul was one of the prisoners. We see that Paul is accompanied by Aristarchus and Luke. Aristarchus, a traveling companion of Paul. You can read that in Acts chapter 20, verse 4, Acts chapter 19, verse 27. So you see that Paul is not merely as a prisoner in the ship. Even with Julius the centurion, who was in charge of all the prisoners, the way he dealt with Paul was not how he dealt with the other prisoners, because we see that Julius did not treat Paul as a prisoner. Verse 3 says that, we read verse 3 here, which says, the next day when we landed at Sidon, and Julius, in his kindness to Paul, allowed him to go to his friends so that they might provide for his needs. So he was very considerate towards Paul. He knew the kind of trial that Paul went through in Caesarea and what the ruling of both Festus and Agrippa was. And so he knew that there was no big crime that Paul had committed. So he was kind of friendly with Paul. And even while they were in a very trying situation, when the ship nearly broke and when there was a shipwreck, verse 42 says, the soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. But the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life and kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump aboard first and get to land. The rest were to get there on planks and or on other pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached land safely. So we see here that even when the soldiers that were a cohort or a centurion would always have about 100 soldiers with him. And so these soldiers was keen on killing the prisoners, in which Paul was one. But the centurion very clearly says in verse 43, but the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life and kept them from carrying out their plan. So Paul, I don't see Paul as purely as a prisoner being taken over to Rome. The kind of relationship he had with the people in the ship, with his companions, he was more of a friend. That is why we see Paul as a friend. The second point we see is Paul even wearing the hat of a captain of the ship. He was not just there as a prisoner, but also giving tips on sailing and things like that. Because we read in verses 9 and 10, or verse 9 to 12, Paul, much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous because by now it was after the Day of Atonement. So Paul warned them, men, I see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and cargo and to our own lives. But the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship. Since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that we should sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. This was the harbor in Crete, facing both southwest and northwest. Now, a lot of technical terms in this, but then what we need to understand is Paul, first of all, we need to understand that Paul was an expert sailor because he had traveled on these routes on several occasions. We know that on his return journeys from his missionary journeys, he used the sea route to come back to Caesarea and to Jerusalem, all those places. And so he was quite familiar with the route. That is something that we should accept. The second thing is he knew that it was dangerous. It was a dangerous part of the year to sail. And usually that winter time, that is November to February, they don't sail much. So all this discussion happens while they were in Fairhaven. And Paul says it's better for us to stay here, not to venture out into the sea. But the people, they don't listen to Paul. And then they go on. And instead of, they wanted to go to Phoenix, which was probably a better port, and they wanted to winter there. But Paul's advice to the captain, you see in verse 10, it says, men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to the ship and cargo and to our own lives. So he wants the captain, but then they don't take his advice. The centurion preferred to winter in Phoenix than Fairhaven. So as I told you, this discussion happens while the ship is in Fairhaven, and the centurion and maybe the captain and others thought that Phoenix was a better place than Fairhaven for them to winter. And they only wanted to go a short distance. We saw in the map that Fairhaven and Phoenix was not a big distance, but they wanted to go there and winter there until the season was conducive for them to sail. But then they don't reach Phoenix; they get lost in the sea, and we know we will see what happens after this. So we see Paul as a friend, Paul as a captain, and then we see Paul as a counselor. This we read in Acts chapter 27, verse 21 to 25 and 33 to 36. First, 21 to 25. After they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, men, you should have taken my advice not to sail to Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. But now I urge you to keep your courage, because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Last night, an angel of God, to whom I belong and whom I serve, stood beside me and said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar. and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So keep your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as He has told me. So we see here Paul's words, and this, mind you, this is in the middle of the storm where the ship is lost, and there is a lot of panic, there is a lot of confusion. They don't know what to do. They fear for their lives. There is no hope for survival at all because they are lost in the middle of the sea, and the ship is kind of moving towards those quicksand, and there is the fear of getting stuck in the quicksand and dying there. So there is a lot of uncertainty, and we see Paul's words of assurance in verse 22. He says, "But now I urge you to keep your courage, because not one of you will be lost; only the ship will be destroyed." And Paul's words of encouragement, of assurance, and his basis of saying this is not just a feeling that has come to him. It is so easy for us to say words of assurance to people without receiving it from God. But here, it was a clear revelation. Paul had a clear revelation from God. Verse 23 says very clearly, "Last night an angel of God, to whom I belong and whom I serve, stood beside me." And he conveys the revelation that the angel gives. And it says, "Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand. You are going to reach Rome." The present situation looks that you all are going to die in the sea. The ship is not going to head anywhere. There is the fear of the ship breaking up. As you read this chapter, you'll know what all they did. They tried tying up the ship, and so many technical things that we may not understand. But then it is all mentioned. They did everything possible to safeguard the ship. And they knew that they were losing out, and they were fighting a losing battle. And Paul says, "I have had a revelation. The angel of God stood beside me and said, 'Do not be afraid.'" Not only Paul, all those who are sailing with all the 276 people, we are going to reach safely. We are not going to lose our lives. And this is, you find in 21 to 25. And when we come to 33 to 36, Paul says, just before dawn, Paul urged them to eat. Verse 33, "For the last 14 days," he said, "you have been in constant suspense and have gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Not one of you will lose a single hair from his head." After he said this, he took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of them all. Then he broke it and began to eat, and they were all encouraged and ate some food themselves. When is it we lose our appetite, and when we stop eating? Most of the time it happens when we have lost hope, when we come to a point of giving up, or when we are extremely exhausted in life and we think that there is no hope, there is no future, we even stop eating. There are people who stop eating. And mind you, these guys have been tossed and torn in the sea for 14 days. Verse 13 says, for 14 days, you have been in constant suspense and you have gone without food. Imagine the frustration of the people, the prisoners, the soldiers, the centurion, the captain, the sailors, those and other people who are in the ship with Paul and Paul's companions, all of them struggling and wondering what will happen. They don't know what the future is going to be. And notice the words that Paul used. In verse 34 and 33 and 34, it says, Paul urged them. A true counselor, isn't it? When people are at the point of giving up, when people are sad, when people are going through a hard time, you have to urge them. You have to encourage them. You have to be a support to them. You have to give them the push that they require. You need to kind of understand them, and you need to give them some kind of assurance and hope. And that is what Paul is doing in verse 33 and verse 34. He says, Paul urged them to eat. In verse 33, we read, And in verse 34, he says, now I urge you to take some food. So how Paul was, you see Paul as a counselor. And there it says in verse 36 that they were all encouraged and ate some food themselves. So now do you get a picture of Paul in the ship? We don't see Paul as a prisoner. It is very limited if you look at Paul only as a prisoner. So we saw Paul as a friend. He was friends with the centurion himself, who was willing to free him, and that he could, in Sidon, he could go and meet his friends and could be ministered to, and he was a friend there. And he was a friend with the rest of the people in the ship, is what we understand. The second, we saw Paul as a captain, even when when he knew that it was a wrong decision to sail, he was vocal about it, and he said. Then we see Paul as a counselor. When people are discouraged, when people are so afraid of survival, and how Paul reveals God, what God has revealed to him, and how he encourages them and how they are encouraged. So we see Paul more than a prisoner. This brings us to the third and last point, that is God is present in the storms of life. Wonderful thing that I've been very, very encouraged as I read this chapter. And the first thought that came to my mind is, God knows the end from the beginning. Just take a moment to think about this word, this phrase. God knows the end from the beginning. Wonderful, isn't it? We may wonder, why am I going through these kind of struggles? Or why is Paul could have asked, why all these struggles? You wanted me to go to Rome, and here I am. I appealed in Caesarea that I'm appealing to Caesar, and the only reason is for me to get to Rome is to be a witness there, and I'm doing what you want me to do, God. But why this struggle? Why this pain? And one thing we all need to know is, God knows the end from the beginning. And God had a plan for Paul to witness for him in Rome. Acts chapter 23, verse 11. You remember that part where God appeared, and when he was in Jerusalem, when he was ill-treated, and when there was a riot in Jerusalem, when he went to Jerusalem after his second missionary journey and the trials there, and God appeared to him. And it says in Acts chapter 23, verse 11, the following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome. These are the words of the Lord to Paul. And so Paul knows that God knows the end from the beginning. If God has been the one who has called you to do it, and if God is the one who has brought you to this situation is not the end. He has the end in mind. Many a times, our vision, we are so short-sighted that we can't look beyond certain areas. We can't look beyond some distance, but God knows the end in mind. He has the end in mind. The second thing is, God appears in the storm. As you read verse 23, it says very clearly, last night an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me. Wonderful, isn't it? We often think that we are left alone in the storm. But God appears in the storm. That's the wonderful truth about our God. He never leaves us. He is there with us. He is in the storm with us. When he was with his disciples on the boat was almost sinking, but Jesus was there in the boat to calm the storm. So remember, as it says in verse 23, God, the angel of God, appeared to Paul while the ship was being hit by the storm. So the third thing that I want to say is, God makes a way where there seems to be no way. Verse 24, and said, the angel appeared, whom I serve, stood beside me and said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. Imagine how encouraging those words were to a large group that are fearing death, that are fearing all the struggles, who have not been eating for 14 days. They don't want to eat, they've given up. And there, Paul is saying, God makes a way where there seems to be no way. Wonderful, isn't it? Here in the storm, God says that none of you are going. The angel of God stood and said, Paul, don't be afraid. Those are the words that we need. When we go through, there is so much of fear in life. What will happen? What will happen with my family? What will happen with my finances? What will happen with my future? What will happen with my health? And just imagine God reaching out to you and saying, do not be afraid. God makes a way where there seems to be no way. That ship is being tossed and thrown in the rough sea, in the thick of the storm. And Paul has the courage because he sees God, and God has given him a word. So what is the word that God is giving you when you hit storms, or when storms of life hit you? You always look for the way that God is making in the storm. And finally, he not only consoles you, he not only calms you down, God makes you a herald of his hope and peace. So Paul understands that he is not there only to be strengthened. God didn't appear to him only for him to receive a new strength and hope. He knows that he has a ministry to the rest of the people in the ship. And so in verse 25, he speaks to them. He says, so keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. We are called to be heralds of God's hope and peace, particularly in a time such as this, where the whole world is struggling. It is not just one part of the world. The whole world is struggling. We do not know what will happen to us. We think everything is going to become normal, but all of a sudden we see a sudden rise in cases. There are people who are struggling. There are people in pain, in fear, who have come to the point of giving up. God makes each one of us a herald of his hope and peace. So, what is our takeaway from this Bible study? Mission is trusting God in the storms of life. Dear friends, what a wonderful thought. And as we read Paul, the thought that came to my mind is, even after God saying, Paul, do not be afraid, all of you are going to be safe. The journey was not, it's not that after the angel of God appeared to Paul, everything calmed down. It became even worse. Things, as you read Acts chapter 27, you'll find that things became worse. So just because God has given us an assurance, it doesn't mean that everything has to fall into place and everything has to become smooth again. He continues to give us lessons that take us through the storms and to make us trust in him more and more. Like the iron that is melted or the gold that is purified in the fire, it has to be purified completely. So it's not just that it hits the fire and then it is purified. It has to be in the fire for a long time till it is completely purified. The same way, don't ever think that because God has given you a promise, everything is going to work well. But the greatest assurance that we have is God is present with us in the storms of life. So friends, I want you to read Acts chapter 27 once again. Maybe tonight before you go to bed, read Acts chapter 27 As I told you, there are a lot of technical terms. We cannot, I don't have the time to go into the technical terms. But there are so many more things that we can gain as we read Acts chapter 27. I want you to read Acts chapter 27, keeping that outline in mind. The first part was all about the root. The second thing we saw about Paul, more than a prisoner. He was a friend, he was a captain, and he was a counselor. And then when we talked about God, God is present in the storms of life. I want you to keep this word registered in your mind. God knows the end from the beginning. He knows the end from the beginning. God appears in the storm. God makes a way where there seems to be no way. And God makes you a herald of his hope and peace. I pray for each one of you that as we go forth in life, let us continue to trust God in the storms of life. God bless you.